Trauma.
Sounds like you need a little rest.
I scheduled a massage the day back we got back.
I love it.
I had foresight.
Well put.
Okay, let's go ahead, bring to order this meeting of Templeton Community Services District Board of Directors. Today is January 7th at 7 p.m. Let's go ahead and do roll call, please.
Treasurer Chardonish,
Here.
Logan,
Here?
Mortensen.
Here.
Peterson
Here.
and Tyrone. Here.
And just for the record, Director Mortensen is participating in this meeting remotely due to a qualifying recent reason. It is permissible under the Brown Act.
Great. Thank you for joining us. All right, let's go ahead and stand for pledge of allegiance.
Sure. Yeah, I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Great, thank you. Have a seat, please. Okay, order of business. Do any of the board members would like to change the order of business? Public comments. Members of the public may address the board on any items of interest within the subject matter jurisdiction of the board, but not on the agenda today. In compliance with the Brown Act, the board cannot discuss or act on items not on the agenda. Anybody from public would like to make a comment? That's not, yes? If you don't mind going to the podium, please, and introduce yourself. We appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you for coming.
Hi, I'm Bill Nowinski. I live in Templeton here. I received this flyer with my latest trash bill. And it states on, Templeton Community Service District, residential trash and recycling service guide. And on it, there's a monthly residential service rates. I tried to contact them so they could get the lowest rate for the 32-gallon cart service. It doesn't appear that there is a 32-gallon cart service. It seems that in Templeton, the only thing you can do is get a 96-gallon green trash container, a 64-gallon recyclable container, and a 32-gallon just regular trash container.
Right.
I was wondering, is there someone that I could talk to change this so I can get the smaller containers, or?
Yeah, I can probably assist. So are you looking for, you have a choice with our rate structure to have one of three sizes for your garbage service. That's the gray or black can. 32, 64, 96 gallons approximately, maybe off a gallon or two on the sizes. So you can choose a smaller one. The standard size service for the recycling and green waste are larger, as you mentioned, but our rate structure does allow you to select a smaller one. There's just not a cost savings. Are you looking for a smaller recycling can or a smaller green
I
waste
like
can?
all of the cans, yeah, well, the trash, the black can, it's the smallest that there is. But I would like to get smaller cans for both the recycling and the green trash.
You don't use that, you don't use that.
Yeah, just me and my wife now, so when we had, 4 kids, it was different, but now it's, we really don't need
Yeah,
that large containers.
I don't know if they have the containers in stock, but our structure allows the customer to select a smaller can. There's just not a cost savings associated.
Okay,
You're just looking for less space, like just take up less space in your garage or wherever you keep the can.
yeah, and then,
Let me, I'll reach out to them and I'll circle back with you.
Okay, great. Okay, thank you.
Well, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Okay, any other public comments? I don't see anybody else. We'll go ahead and move on to consent agenda. We have 2 items on the consent agenda. One is the minutes from the December 17th, 2024. And the second item is resolution number 01-2025, which is the wage schedule update. Do any board members would like to pull any of those 2 items? No? Anybody from public would like to pull any of those 2 items? Okay, if not, then I will entertain a motion for the consent agenda, please.
I'll make a motion that the board accept and approve the minutes of the December 17th, 2024 meeting and resolution number 01-2025, the wage schedule update.
Great, Do I have a second?
Second.
That's it. Okay, go ahead, please.
Directors Logan,
Aye.
Peterson,
Yes.
Mortensen.
Aye.
Tyrone. Aye. And Fardonish.
Aye. Okay, motion passes. I vote. Great. We're on to our business item is appointment of residents to internal standing committees. General Manager?
Sure, I can summarize this for you. For the last couple of years, you've enabled residents and invited residents to serve as voting members of your internal standing committees, of which there are 4. And then now for several years, about 5 years, we've had residents serve on a Measure A oversight committee. The appointments to at least the 4 standing committees were for the calendar year of 2024. They were made last January. We ended up with a vacancy on one of those due to a committee member coming up and serving on the board. And we appointed a replacement a resident to that Admin and Finance Committee mid-year. All of those appointments have lapsed. And so in November, we issued a press release and sent out information on the district's website and a few other local sources and invited residents to apply for those openings. We received some interest beyond the 3 applicants that are shown here. We actually received another application from someone who has a Templeton address but does not reside within the TCSD boundaries. So they were excluded residency as a requirement. And then I also talked to a couple people who resided in Paso that were looking to get involved and were not qualified. But these 3, Keith Agson, Eric Marlowe, and Bill Nowinski, submitted applications. Keith Agson for Fire and Emergency Management Committee, Eric Marlowe for Parks and Recreation and Refuse and Water and Wastewater Utilities, and William Nowinski for Parks, Recreation and Refuse. Just to sort of spread out the service, we're recommending that Keith Agson be appointed to Fire and Emergency Management, Eric Marlowe to Water and Wastewater Utilities. He's also on he's on that committee currently, and William Nowinski to Parks, Recreation and Refuse. You do have the option of appointing more than one person to a committee. As you can see, we had 2 residents who were interested in serving on Parks, Recreation and Refuse, but you may recall that about a year ago, you changed that policy so that if there's a resident, one resident would be a primary voting member. Any other residents that are appointed to that committee would be alternates, so that it would be easier to schedule and achieve a quorum at those meetings. So if you did opt to have multiple residents on the Parks, Recreation and Refuse Committee, one of those would need to be alternate.
Okay, great. Thank you for that report.
We do have 1 applicant here tonight as
Great,
well.
thank you. Okay, so you've already, any questions that no, okay. Any comments from the public on that? Are you okay with for the Parks and Rec being appointed to that?
Yeah, that'd be fine.
Yeah, okay, great. All right, so I'll bring it back to the board. If no more comments or questions, I'll entertain a motion.
Well, I'll make a motion that the board accept the appointment of residents to the standing committees with Keith Axon to the Fire and Emergency Management Committee, Eric Marlowe being the primary, being on the Water, Wastewater Utilities, and as an alternate on Park and Rec, and William Nowinski as the Park and Rec
Okay,
and Refuge.
okay, so that was not what the was the recommendation.
Well, I think, didn't you just say that?
No,
we have-
Yeah, but we didn't discuss.
You have the option, but we didn't recommend that just because of the confusion of the alternate primary status, but you're free to do so if that's the board would prefer.
So maybe we should have a discussion about that,
Yeah.
because I think in the past it has raised some
Yes.
challenges for the district in terms of scheduling. By having where there's more than one community member, it's just one more person that the district has to coordinate schedules with. Whereas if the community member has a primary and an alternate, it gives a little more flexibility. Because for example, we could have where,
So you were saying to have the alternate then?
I think we need to have a primary and an
Oh,
alternate,
you think-
especially where we've got two people on Park and Rec. So I think we do need to designate one person being the primary and one is the alternate.
Yeah, or we could just go with just one primary and have no alternate. Because according to our bylaws, we don't have to have a resident on the committee for a quorum.
Is
Right,
the
you could-
member willing to be on an alternate committee such as admin and finance or Measure A that would satisfy that?
Okay, good.
I'm sorry, I think your question was, is one of the applicants willing to serve?
Is the applicant willing to move their preference from Parks and Rec as an alternative to one of the other committees that does not have any applicants at this time?
Oh, I see.
Oh, no, I mean, we gave, the application gives has a box they can check. They could have checked all of them if they wish. So I think it's safe to assume they applied for the committees.
I don't think there's a harm in having them attend, more than one person attend, but I think when it comes to voting and just the ease of scheduling, it would,
Yeah.
it would be,
Okay,
I think, more favorable to do a primary and an alternate.
I agree. Okay, I'm okay with that.
I just have a question. Is there any implication if we have alternates for some of the committees but not the others?
No, I think your bylaws are set up to permit alternates,
Okay.
but not require them. And in the case of, we actually haven't ran into this circumstance yet, but if the board were to appoint both a primary and an alternate, we would still attempt to schedule it with all four of them and expect all four of two of them being board members, two of them being residents participate. It's just only the primary, if they were in attendance, would be a voting member.
Yeah, but we're not gonna, because we're not gonna delay things if, say, the alternates, you know.
Yeah, you know what, we'll do it the same way we have. We'll send out a series of dates to everybody. And if only the alternate can't make it and everybody else can, we would proceed with that.
All right, that's what I wanted to make sure. Okay, sounds good. Okay, so I'm sorry.
I'll second the motion as read.
Okay, okay,
So the motion still stands.
all right. I didn't know if you finished it, but okay, all right. And then you seconded it, Director Peterson? All right, roll call, please.
Directors Logan,
Aye.
Peterson,
All right.
Mortensen,
Aye.
Tyrone. Aye. And Fardonish.
Aye. Great, thank you. The motion passes 5-0. All right, next is the resolution number 02-2025, which is revisions to strategic financial policies.
Yes, good evening. For a couple of reasons, the Admin and Finance Committee, including a resident on the committee, reviewed the strategic financial policies at its most recent meeting in November. One was because you've stated you want these reviewed annually. And secondly, that staff had recommended a couple of pretty minor changes to the purchasing policy. When the purchasing policy changes that the committee are recommending for the board's consideration affect three areas. One is really simple. The district has adopted the Uniform Public Construction Cost Accounting Act. We're a member of that. It's a way of simplifying certain public works projects with certain thresholds or dollar limitations. This is codified in our code and it's already in our purchasing policy. The policy, the limits that are in our purchasing policy come from the act as it existed up through December 31st of this year. Last year, there was a bill that was approved that took effect, that was signed into law, took effect January 1st, that increased those limits, those thresholds, mildly, 60,000 to 75,000, 200,000, 220,000, as an example. Our code, our purchasing policy already contains language that allows any new limits as set by state law to go up sort of automatically. But since we were recommending a few other changes, we felt that was important to sort of codify those in the policy, since this was coming before you anyways. And then secondarily, there's a section of the policy that's written today, sort of unintentionally, I believe, where there's that reference that I just spoke of, that allows these limits to go up automatically references some of, but not all of the sections of our policy. And so therefore, this revision would sort of clean that up and reference all of those sections of the policy. There's one, I'm speaking of a specific example where if the district were to follow this code, this portion of the law, get informal bids, the lowest bid come in at under today's example, come in at $225,000. It would be too high for the district to award it under the code unless the board of directors were to take a 4/5 vote to allow it to move forward. There's a small threshold, I believe, between $220,000 and $235,000 where you could do that under the code, under the act. But it's ambiguous as to whether our code would permit that, or I'm sorry, purchasing policy would permit that today, because the reference to permitting these limits to go up automatically doesn't cite that particular section of the policy. So that's the correction that's made there, or that's the recommended action there. The two other changes are one, to the credit card policy. There's some minor cleanup to that in terms of how receipts are submitted and just clarification about how that policy works. Nothing material, except that the policy right now states that departmental managers can be assigned a credit card in their name for district use, for district purchases. And the recommendation is to extend that to fire captains. And the purpose is pretty straightforward. Oftentimes the fire captains are working non-traditional hours when, say, the fire chief wouldn't be available, for example, on a weekend, and they need to make a purchase for a station supply or something for the engine. And then probably more significantly, if they're out on an assignment, an out of the area assignment, and need to make a purchase or a repair to the fire engine or something else that's needed on site, they would have a district credit card on their possession. So that was recommended. Those changes were recommended by the committee to come forward. The third area is something that came up during the committee's discussion, dealing with check signing. Right now, our policy is that all checks that are written are 2 signature checks, one of which shall be a member of the board of directors. The concern came that occasionally, or maybe about half the time, we issue payroll checks every other week, so 26 times a year. About half of the time we issue payroll checks, there are few to zero actual checks written. All of our full-time employees and most of our even reserve firefighters are on direct deposit, and there's not a physical check that's written. However, some or many of the typically young youth sports officials, referees for soccer and basketball, etc., have checks that they're pretty modest in size, $100-ish. And the issue that was raised by the committee was, can we eliminate the requirement of having a second check signer on these relatively small checks? Because what if we can't find a second person to sign the check and payday comes and then we're late delivering a check or something? That has not happened in my time here. I'm unaware of it ever happening. But it would simplify things on the rare occasion that that circumstance might come about. So the recommendation at the time, the committee discussed a limit of like payroll checks of under $100. After the committee meeting, staff reviewed likely check amounts and found that, pretty much every time we have a check run, we have youth sports officials that have a check that's more than $100. So it really wouldn't accomplish the goal of not needing to have a board member come in to sign that paycheck to achieve the deliverance of that check in time. And so we're recommending that limit be set at $250. If the board wishes to implement that policy change, then it would accomplish the goal. You were provided in your packet both red line versions of these changes as well as a clean copy. The changes that are recommended, the only change to the strategic financial policies itself are the line that references the purchasing policy. The purchasing policy changes were again provided in red line and clean copy. There were some typos that were discovered and then some other clarifications that were recommended that didn't materially change the recommendations. So we've incorporated those, and those were issued to the board and made available on the website yesterday morning. So as you consider these, as you consider this item, please be considering the latest version of the draft proposed changes. I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Great, thank you. Any questions from the board? Okay, any questions from the public on this item? Bring it back to the board. Any comments? If not, then I'll entertain a motion to approve resolution number 2-2025.
Yeah, I'll make the motion that we approve resolution 02-2025, updating the strategic finance policies and reflect minor changes that have been made and what we talked about in the new exhibits.
Perfect, thank you. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, great. We have go ahead, roll call, please.
Directors Peterson,
Yes.
Tyrone,
Yes.
Logan,
Aye.
Mortensen,
Aye.
and Fardonish.
Aye, great, motion passes 5. Perfect, thank you for the great job you guys did there. Next item is review of 2020-2023 strategic plan, part 2. So we're gonna go through some more of our strategic plan, and this is just pure discussion, review, I should say, it's a review. So we're obviously not discussing any changes or anything like that at this point.
Yes, just again, as a reminder, the board adopted a new strategic plan that contained a number of elements in May of 2020, with most of that work taking place in developing that strategic plan in the winter, early 2020. Just as you review these items, this update, just keep in mind that the drafting of this document took place immediately before COVID. I'm coordinating the review with the board president. What we've decided to do is kind of break up the review. The core strategies include not only the strategic goal, but then elements to achieve meeting the goal. So that's presented as core strategies, but the header, as you look at these items, are the strategic goal with supporting elements or items that appear immediately beneath them. Broken this into two sections, and we have staff to support here tonight, and we will at the next meeting too, support the specific strategic goals and core strategies. And we want this to be informal, ask questions where we don't have a written report for you, but a kind of a short, or we're prepared to provide sort of a short summary, but happy to go into this further if it's helpful or necessary. So again, these are the items that are highlighted in your staff report, coming directly out of the 2020-2023 strategic plan, in no particular order other than the order that they're presented in the plan. So the first being a Parks and Recreation strategic goal, increase funding to support facilities and programs of the Parks and Recreation Department and close the department deficit. The strategies lead to the fulfillment of the strategic goal, and then there are 5 in this case. Just wanted to rewind the clock a little bit to help kind of provide some perspective. It's funny how the yellow highlighting changes the color of the room. The Parks and Recreation budget had been challenged leading into this period of time, with some increasing costs and not enough revenue to cover it, and there were some small but real deficits that the fund was facing. And so I think that's why this issue of closing the departmental deficit was paramount. The first strategy stated, core strategy, sustain financial support for special events and youth programs. This was really a goal that had been in place for the prior decade. In other words, maintain funding for our core programs in Parks and Recreation. Funding has been sustained. I mean, the district has not altered its property tax allocation to Parks and Recreation in the past 5 years, or leading up to this or during this period of time. So funding has been sustained for those key programs. I do want to point out that funding for Parks and Recreation comes, the tax dollars come from property taxes, but there's also quite a bit of funds that come in from participation in the events, in the youth sports in particular, and then sponsorship and other revenue sources that come in for special events like concerts in the park. There was a period of time immediately following the drafting of this goal, COVID hit, right? And then, our programs changed a lot. We didn't offer certain things like Conscious of the Park. It wasn't an option in 2020. And our youth sports activities changed pretty significantly. They weren't what they were previously or under normal circumstances. So we did have some deficits that immediately followed, really COVID related, that were not anticipated at the time that the language was drafted. But those programs did return. The second core strategy, continue funding stream from solid waste franchise fees. And I want to describe this as I recall it. In the many months preceding the development of the strategic plan, the board had examined whether or not to merge the solid waste fund, which had revenues that exceeded its expenses as a result of franchise fees, with the Parks and Recreation Fund. And it was, at the time this was drafted, anticipated to be in effect the following year, as if the decision were made. Actually, it was made. However, COVID struck, and as we went forward, that action actually was paused. So for fiscal year 2020, 2021, that merger did not take place. Those excess proceeds did not roll into Parks and Recreation. However, for the 21-22 year and going forward, that has taken place and did occur. So, and it remains in place. So that funding stream, I think the term maybe continue might be a little fuzzy there, but that funding stream has occurred during in the year that followed the development of this plan. Third core strategy, actively pursue available grants to partially fund department programs. We've not been successful in finding grants to fund programs. We have been successful on a couple of occasions finding grants to fund projects. Both are quite difficult for us in Templeton. You know, we are not a disadvantaged community. Many of the parks grants that exist are specifically for disadvantaged communities. As a matter of fact, they have a really cool GIS mapping tool that says you want to build a facility here, and then it determines the median income around the area and tells you immediately whether you're eligible or not. We do not have a place in Templeton that is eligible for most of those grant opportunities. Of course, the fourth one, deliver Evers Park Improvement Plan. Feel like we're ever so close to this, but it's undoubtedly been frustratingly slow. We actually just finalized our comments back to the landscape architect today. Last little detail worked out, and these plans are ready to be resubmitted to the county. As you know, they've been to the county building department twice for approval, with a number of corrections requested. And then the fifth strategy, examine alternatives to reduce the department's water bill and other operational costs. And again, to help put this in context, you may recall that prior to 2018, the district's facilities, this building, our parks, et cetera, were provided district services, but the district did not bill for those services. It was determined in 2018 that was out of compliance with Prop 218. Well, that's good. 2018 was anyhow. So following the establishment of new rates in 2018, all the district facilities were on billed accounts, and that was pretty material for Parks and Recreation, because we use a lot of water at Evers Park in particular, and also at German Park from time to time. We have specific to the water component of the water bill. We have a well at German Park that's existed for many years that we utilize, and it partly and mostly offsets the irrigation use. It's a seasonal well, but during dry times or dry years will not provide sufficient water to fully irrigate the park, and then during wet periods it does, or wetter periods it will. At Evers Park, there is a well on site as well. It was drilled for another purpose, but during this time period, we did airlift that water, in other words, mimic the pumping of that water and have that water tested for water quality purposes. And it was found that it was not suitable for irrigation even with supplements. So it's just the water quality is quite poor at the site. We did not move forward with trying to hook that well up into the irrigation system. Otherwise, the department's continued to examine ways to alter its costs or keep its costs low.
Do you want to take questions now, or do you want to wait?
Yeah, I think we should do so on each section.
Okay, then I'll wait to,
Well, I mean, on each,
well,
yeah, each goal, yeah.
So can we talk about, what the other operational costs might be? Do you have an example of what that might be?
I mean, this was language that was developed by the board.
Yeah, I
with the
know,
consultant
it
at the
was
time,
language,
yeah,
but it's just that I'm just thinking that some of this is still relevant.
it is.
For the next strategic plan, but when I see other operational costs, I would like to see what that is. Because for the most part, it's really your programs that you offer, your staffing, and then the water is kind of a known, but so I'm trying to kind of.
Well, I mean,
wrap
there's
my head around
supplies,
what
I
are
mean-
the other operational costs, but those are kind of
Right,
not.
they're not very extravagant. We've
Yeah.
got uniforms for programs and office supplies for the office and utility costs and staff costs.
I imagine some of it might have been other like utility costs, right? There are times where the gas bill, for example, at the recreation building has been fairly large, cause we've got the kids in there, the preschool kids. We have to heat it, right? And it's also a bit of an HVAC issue over there that we're always trying to work out. So I imagine it was something like that, a bit of a catch-all for utility costs.
Yeah. I just think
but I
it would
don't
be nice
recall
to, if we
specifically.
define exactly what that might be,
Oh,
because
yeah, Smart-
ideally, with
smart
these
goals,
core
yeah.
strategies, you should have milestones below this.
Exactly.
To say how you're going to achieve, what are the steps that you're going to
Yeah, the measurables,
implement to get to that core strategy. So unless we define what those other operational costs are, I would recommend that we look at perhaps removing that verbiage. So just some comments there.
Well, we're not gonna change any of this, but the.
No,
new-
I'm just saying
Oh,
when we meet
Well,
in the
that's
future.
gonna be, yeah,
That's
gonna
that's
be-
an issue for me
yeah.
because it's too ambiguous.
Yeah.
Right.
Saying other operational.
Like a catch-all.
Yeah,
Agreed.
it can't be measured.
Right, gotta have the smart goal strategies.
Director Peterson, do you have a comment?
No, I'll wait.
Okay, all right.
Any other questions or discussion on this first Parks and Rec strategic goal?
I don't think, Dr. Morrison, are you okay so far?
Yeah, I think that the one part is when we talk about the grants and the availability of those grants. If that's not a fungible item, I don't see a necessity to have it within on the core strategies. Unless there are actual fungible grants that are available to our Parks and Rec department.
Yeah, I mean, these are the ones I spoke of are the state grants. There are occasionally other agencies or other grants that are available and really, but we've just not been able to obtain one since 2020 for Parks and Recreation. We do utilize the Templeton Recreation Foundation much in the same way, though. The Recreation Foundation provides scholarships that fund player participation in our programs and have funded sponsorships of key programs. So those funds are making their way into the operations budget for Parks and Recreation.
Okay.
Thank you. Well, let me just ask public, any comments from public so far?
I just had a question, will you be adding to your core strategies in this, or are you just reviewing what's?
No, we're just reviewing for tonight and preparing for next month where we're gonna start looking at a new strategic plan. So next month we'll be changing.
Okay, I have, so what are we going to be looking at now? I mean, that's
Oh, we're just reviewing, so
it's my
basically,
understanding that we're supposed to be looking at this and saying what we want to talk about at the next meeting that we have to go over these. So what are we gonna look at? when we had discussed, or actually discussed the changes.
When next month when we go, so basically we're gonna create a new strategic plan, and this could be a guide. We don't necessarily need to replicate this, but we're gonna use this as a guide. And it's gonna-
Again, it's my understanding from what I've read the last week that we're gonna look at this and say, tell staff what we want to discuss.
Oh, no, and this part, we're just reviewing, for future, next month, then we are gonna,
But last
we're
week-
gonna be open session and we're gonna have robust
It
discussion.
says
robust
right here
discussion.
in the paragraph that we're,
Yeah,
We're
last
gonna
meeting
re-
we did make suggestions.
right.
Yeah,
What
Yeah,
we're gonna do.
I think, I mean, I guess I took it for granted that you would want to have some Parks and Recreation related goals going forward. But I guess you could determine now if the goals surrounding funding, in general has been totally met, then you could strike it and not look at this further.
Okay, but I am just reading what the recommended action is, and it says,
we're
provide
trying to
direction to
achieve.
staff on which of these items should be further discussed with possible revisions. And I don't see us doing that right now. I mean, we just went over, talked about some stuff, and then we're moving on. So what are we gonna, I'm asking what the paragraph says, what are we gonna concentrate on? Because that's what I understand staff wants to know, so they can concentrate on it to get ready for the offsite. Or am I reading this wrong?
no,
I
I
think,
think
I
it's
think
good
that's,
to go through it
Yeah,
and
I mean,
look
my-
at, there's updates that, because we haven't looked at this in a while, and some of these strategic goals have been met and some have not. So I think there's an opportunity to get an update from the general manager in terms of what ones have been met, because we can take those off the list.
yes,
And I think there's additional comments that I have also on this one, continuing the funding stream for solid waste franchise fees. To me, that's not a poor strategy. That's a policy decision. That's just saying, from a policy standpoint, we're going to take the solid waste franchise fees and we're going to
Yeah.
dedicate it to Parks and Rec. So I would say that one would be removed as well. I don't know that I'm ready this evening to say, or even, I don't think Mel is ready to say, what should we add to this?
no, and that's not the goal of this meeting is, I agree with you, this paragraph may be a little bit confusing about, discuss possible revisions, maybe the goal was, maybe the meaning was just how much time we wanna spend on this area for our, for when we do the, discussion. But for tonight, the goal was to review this, get everybody on the same page. And then we'll come back next month, and obviously Parks and Rec's gonna have core strategies, and we'll discuss it. At that point, we could say, I mean, again, we don't necessarily need to replicate this. We're gonna have our own core strategies next month.
Yeah, I think like, to your point, Director Peterson, I think that we can look and say, okay, do we want to, in the future, continue to interrogate and investigate keeping the strategic goal of increasing some funding support for Parks and Rec? Is that something that we want to continue to pursue? I would assume yes,
Yeah.
great. And then in future meeting, we would dive deeper into the strategies to support that.
Yeah,
So I think in that way, we are still, we are accomplishing something, which is that we're checking whether or not that strategic goal is still relevant for us to discuss at a future point. So I think we would all agree that increasing funding to support Parks and Rec is a relevant
Yes. But
for
the
our next strategic
details-
plan. Yeah, so yes, and then we'll nail into the strategies into greater detail and figure out which ones are still relevant, which ones we've accomplished in the future.
yes. So we're still gonna continue to have a discussion, but this is just, yeah.
So this strategic goal, we think
Yeah.
is still applicable and should be discussed when we have our offsite next month.
Exactly. Is that fair?
If it's fair for the staff, I mean, if I'm over there, I'm not gonna bring it up the next meeting, but that's fine.
Well, I mean, I think we anticipate that there would be new goals established for Parks and Recreation. May or may not incorporate what we've had in the past.
All right.
The second Parks and Recreation strategic goal, improve Parks and Recreation Department maintenance to meet the recreational needs of the community. These strategies lead to the fulfillment of the strategic goal. And again, I just want to kind of frame this a little bit. We had come out of a period in the for many years where we had one individual, a utility operator devoted to park maintenance, and really kept the parks in great shape. And following his retirement, we had some turnover, and in this time period, we were a couple years, maybe 3 years into his retirement, and had seen a decline in the maintenance standards at the park. And so I believe this strategy was attempting to deal with that. We had proposed increasing some funding for maintenance. We had brought on younger, I think it was labeled an internship program for parks maintenance for summers, et cetera. But the turnover and the quality of the maintenance was still hampering us. So since then, so let me identify the couple of the core strategies. The first one is a little unique because I don't think it really relates to that goal at all, but we adopted it anyways. Continue to actively identify and utilize community volunteers to assist in operating the department's programs and handling administrative office tasks. So it's not, this goal doesn't identify it as maintenance necessarily. However, we do utilize and have continued to utilize volunteers. All of our youth sports programs are volunteer led, and all the coaching is volunteer led. Quite a bit of the field preparation, particularly for sports like softball, are volunteer based. In other words, these are coaches and teen parents that are prepping the field between games. The district does not have maintenance staff performing those functions between games. On Saturdays, we'll do kind of an initial setup for the field. Those take place through volunteers. And then we do have some volunteer activities for sort of more office tasks. I wouldn't call them administrative tasks, but things like organizing uniforms and preparing, for the beginning of every sport, like we issue basketballs and soccer balls. And those are tasks that we have some volunteers that assist with. There's some volunteer work that takes place at the skate park, but I wouldn't say we've been successful in getting volunteers to do to work the desk, for example, to man the office. The second core strategy, ensure that increased staffing includes improving park maintenance. And this is something that we have been diligent in. I'm not proud to say that that's achieved the intended results yet. We've continued to face turnover. As a matter of fact, since 2020, we've had 4 different individuals primarily assigned to parks maintenance because of staff turnover with quite a bit of gaps in between. We added some additional part-time labor last year to the program, and actually this fiscal year added an additional full-time person and altered the classification to get hopefully somebody who was more qualified, and I think we were able to do that, but he's only been on board for a couple months, so it's kind of hard to see immediate results. I mean, I can say I can see immediate results, but maybe not in the way that was envisioned in terms of turf maintenance or something. We have done a great job of cleaning up the park. I don't know if you haven't been out to this Everest Park over the past month. All the old netting that was in kind of tatters has been removed, including all the cables, to really clean the place up.
And the owl boxes.
Yeah, we put it, yeah.
Gophers.
Gophers are not better than they were. They're fast breeders.
He caught 30 of them last week.
30?
He caught it himself, yeah.
Yeah, at one park, yeah, at Evers. 10 at Bethel.
No kidding.
Yeah,
Need it in my house.
and it's still intense.
Alright, so, I mean, I think, going back to your question, I think, again, we'll keep this a strategic goal. And we'll discuss this further, and come up with new core strategies then. So, agreed upon. And then, Mel, also for you, I mean, this hopefully helps you as well. So that way you're prepared, because we want your ideas as well. And, you know, for strategic goals, where you envision our Parks and Rec program and, all the, you know, the whole facility going. So, we obviously will appreciate your input as well. So, so hopefully, as, you know, next time we'll be discussing it even further. But we're gonna continue those, I guess, those two, strategic goals will continue.
Can I make a comment, to Jeff, to your point earlier about how that first core strategy is got some different, elements into it. When we meet in the future, in my brain, I'm thinking perhaps that volunteer engagement is its own separate strategic goal. And so teasing that out and then coming up with strategy, to measure the success of that, but I think, yeah. So
Versus, yeah.
just, keep that in mind. I think that's something we could explore as a separate strategic goal.
Exactly. Oh, that's a great idea. That's good. Great. All right. So we are ready to go to fire and emergency.
Yeah, we have several fire and emergencies, strategic goals. Again, I want to just help frame this. These were drafted primarily in February of 2020. That followed the successful passage of Measure A that went before the voters in August, end of August of 2019. But keep in mind, the funding from Measure A, even though it passed in August of 2019, the district didn't receive its first Measure A parcel tax revenue until December of 2020, so almost a year and a half later. So we're in this time frame where we know Measure A passed, but we don't yet have any money available to implement what the goals of Measure A were. So the first strategic goal, provide fully funded and staffed fire and emergency services to the community 24/7. Again, prior to the implementation of Measure A, in some way, shape, or form, we were staffed during the day, respond from home to the station to the call at night, with some variances there in this period of time. We were not hard staffed 24/7. So as of this time period, February of 2020, those were the circumstances. So the first core strategy, as funding for Measure A is available, implement 24/7 staffing plan. But that occurred in October, might have been like October 30th or so, of 2020. So about 5 months after this was drafted.
So, to your point, is that why the language there is phrased as it is because we hadn't yet seen the money from Measure A? Is that why it's phrased as funding?
Yes,
Okay. Is
yes,
available?
we knew there'd be a delay
Yeah,
in being able to start the program because while the vote's taken a certain date, the money doesn't come in for, in that case, about a year and a half later.
Okay.
So we could remove this as strategic goal then. We
Yes.
achieved this, so we'll go ahead and remove that. And then we'll come up with new ones.
The second core strategy, explore cost recovery through third-party billing for services delivered such as emergency services to residents outside Templeton, fire insurance coverage and assists.
I think we did that.
We have explored this to a certain extent. Yeah, I think we kind of, at least the initial discussions where this probably wasn't gonna be a really significant source of funding. I wouldn't say it's been ruled out, but I think the staff's thought right now is that there's some pending changes with the ambulance contract, maybe that could result in some shifts revenue in the long run, not in the short run, in the long run that the district receives, and we'd like to see how that kind of plays out, if that's something that would be fruitful. Otherwise, we can continue to explore the third-party billing. It's just, you end up having to figure out which services you can bill for. It's not a significant source of likely funding.
Well, so I think it should stay because we are so tight on our fire department budget. But I think when this came up before, Chief, you said that the county prohibited it, correct?
No, the state.
The
The
state.
state prohibits it.
Well, the
because
state doesn't prohibit it because it's being done in other counties.
We're right, where they have a different model.
Well, that's what I'm saying. My point is that what I would like, because I know you sit on the committee with the county for the fire and ambulance services, and I would just like to see that this kind of be pursued as some kind of cost recovery through the county. Because,
So the biggest issue with that is gonna be how a private-public partnership would be set up with the ambulance service, because right now what we can't do is duplicate bill.
Correct.
Because the ambulance service bills for their service for transport and whatnot. We cannot then follow up with another bill. That's what's prohibited by the state and by insurance rules. So what we can do is, look at what is called APOC, Ambulance Performance Objective Committee or Operations Committee, and relook at how that's laid out and distributed.
Yeah.
And add a little billing, to that would then be reimbursed back to the departments.
that's what I'm
So-
looking, because it's really where you've got car accidents. There's a third party. It's not gonna go through a normal health insurance. It's gonna go through an auto insurance
So-
provider.
Correct.
So I
those-
just wanna make sure that if there's some recovery somewhere, that this isn't falling through the cracks.
Yeah, and those types of things, potentially, we can go back after. We can go after insurance claims on negligent fires. Those types of things, but those are more cost recovered than they are a billing.
Yeah, cause I just don't wanna dismiss this as it's not sufficient, because we haven't explored this. And I think until we actually look into this and see what is available, I don't wanna toss this aside.
Okay, well, we're happy to leave it in play.
I mean, I think we just need to be really financially prudent. If there's, you know, because I've provided the third-party billing administrator. They've got the system, they've got the software. We just plug in. The question became whether or not we could legally do it. But if we can't, then is the county doing it?
Well, the county's not doing it. It is a private ambulance company that's doing it. So again, it's that double billing aspect where we're not providing ALS services. So we can't
But
do
we're
a
the
cost,
first responder.
right, but we can't, and we're getting compensated for that through our first responder fees from the ambulance company.
Okay.
Albeit, I think it's
Minimally.
about, it's minimal,
About 10 grand a year.
yeah.
And
Somewhere
If I
around.
can interject a question, if we were to provide the EMS services directly rather than a third party, are we able to do that cost recovery service?
Yes, we would have to get authorization to be that provider through what's called our local EMSA and through state EMSA. And that would allow us to be the local provider, and then we would have to contract with the county to do ambulance transport, ALS care, all of that in a specific geographical area.
Okay,
Each excuse me, each department could technically do that and take a geographical area. But right now, the way the model is set up is San Luis Ambulance bids the entire county. And that's how most contracts are set up, is a private ambulance company or a public entity will come in. For example, what Santa Barbara County was looking at, taking over ambulance services, and they would bid the contract. And then basically what you do is you eliminate the profit margin from the private ambulance companies that goes back into the
So
service.
Paso and Atascadero are under the county umbrella?
On that aspect, yes,
Okay.
yes, all cities, the entire EMS transport world in that regard is under the county.
Except for Cambria Healthcare District.
I'm sorry, you're right, except for.
Oh, Cambria does
Yeah,
that?
they have a
Cambria
health.
Healthcare District, not CSD.
They have
Cambria
their own.
Healthcare District has their own,
Yeah.
own
Okay.
transport provider.
So maybe Chief, if you could think about a way to come up with better wording for the core strategy in this matter, and then so it's something that you could think that we could pursue and come up with the solution, that would be wonderful, because this obviously has been this for 5 years and we haven't done anything, so I think we need to have the input of staff on this, and then, you know, you think a little bit ahead of time to
Yeah, 'cause it's
to
really
figure
not-
out what's the best way, and then we could include that in the strategic plan. I'm not quite sure keeping this one in there because it hasn't worked. So
I
we
would,
have to
I would
look at-
agree, the wording needs to be changed,
Yeah.
because it's not fire insurance coverage,
Yeah,
it's
so,
auto insurance
yeah,
coverage.
so we got, okay, so those are the things if we need to look at, so come up with a way of figuring that.
So if I'm understanding you right,
The intent was under auto insurance coverage.
yeah,
for
but
third
kind of
parties.
sectioning this out to give, okay, how many vehicle accidents we have in a particular year, see what the cost recovery would be, see what that income would be from that.
It's really more of an analysis to say, is it worth pursuing?
Yeah, okay.
So you want that to be a
Yes,
core
yeah,
strat, okay.
yeah.
Okay, so, all right, so we could do that.
Okay, the second,
Just any other questions from public or questions from public on this matter? Yeah, go ahead.
No, just support for that particular issue that's board has dealt with for years. Drilling down on that with a little more specificity would be helpful.
Okay,
So I would say also under this core strategy, because I think it still applies. Because while we've got the 24/7 staffing, it's now the facility for that 24/7 staffing. So I would say we need to add some strategies.
well, that would be, I think that would be different. I could see
You
that.
wanna do this
There might-
separately?
There might be another strategy.
You wanna make it a new strategy? I think
Yeah,
that
it could
just,
be
okay,
yeah,
that's
because
fine.
this
Then
is
I
the
think it just
finance.
needs to be,
Yeah, of course, yeah.
yeah. Well, I don't see this as the
No, no, this is, yeah.
Facility,
Part of the
Fully funded.
funding, part of the
Fully
24/7
funded
was
and
also
staff
now we
hired.
need to have the housing for them.
Yeah,
which
well,
we
I
don't.
think, yeah, we could put a strategic goal that's more specific with that,
Okay.
yeah. Okay.
okay,
Any
then
other questions, comments? Okay,
the next fire and emergency services related goal, create a fire and emergency services master plan. This strategy leads to the fulfillment of this strategic goal. Circulate an RFP from firms known to provide fire department master plans. That was done concluded in very early 2021 anyway, and the district awarded a master plan consulting services agreement. That service was performed, that was presented to the fire committee and then ultimately to the board of directors. Then the district staff supplemented that master plan analysis or evaluation with several other tools or pieces of information, and ultimately adopted a fire and emergency master plan in early 2023. So that item is complete. Okay, and current.
all right. Any questions on that? Cross it off? Okay, all right, we got one off.
I think within that is a revision where Director Logan is talking about the current staffing. This could be that revision on that item. We're looking at a strategic goal within it comes down to staffing and their staffing facilities and whatnot, if we wanted to revise that, or we can create a new one as well.
I'm sorry, under this one.
So that
the
we have a
master
goal
plan?
right here for at least the fulfillment of the emergency services master plan. The master plan has been in place.
Yes,
We had strict from basically looking at the 24/7 staffing. And now one of our primary goals is this implementation of the revised staffing facilities.
okay,
So it's
Okay.
an alternative, maybe, as we could either alternate this or we can create a new goal.
okay. Yes,
Well, you know, it raises the point about the 24/7, that verbiage on that strategic goal needs to be changed. Because to say provide fully funded and staffed fire and emergency services to the community 24/7, that has really been achieved. But we've still talked about the cost recovery, But, so we probably just need a different verbiage in that, maybe to look at the finances and then look at the facility.
Yeah, I think it's probably broader than that as well. I mean,
Yeah.
we defined 24/7 staffing back 5 years ago in a way that we don't operate today. We've since made other changes to the operations model. So for example, when Measure A was approved, we were gonna have two persons on at night and 3 persons on during the day with a combination of full and part-time folks and we've added to that since, right? We've added with the safer funding, we've gone to 3 persons 24/7. And yet that funding will run out, 13 months from now. Unless we're awarded a second, position. So there's some other complexities there that you probably should plan on devoting some time to.
And I think it's also important, if I may, that the board recognizes when we first started this, we were doing about 800 calls a year. This last year, we did almost 1,200 calls. So. and
Things have
there's-
changed.
There's.
So the headings, these core
Of course.
strategy or strategic goals the verbiage needs to be modified.
Exactly.
And then the core strategies below that are also gonna have to support that goal. So there's a number of changes that need to be made here.
So we can't disregard it. And as I recall, we weren't very happy with the master plan and the people that did it. Also, as I recall, I think we had the chief prepare a response, like, I mean, to me, as I recall, that master plan, it was more like an audit and says, you haven't done this, you need to do that. It really wasn't a master plan, and we had the chief respond to that as an audit, and there's a whole.
There's a list of
So,
responses to every recommendation.
And the other point I guess I'd like to make is, when we passed Proposition A, we were talking about a 10-year plan. Well, we're well into that 10-year plan, and I've heard, that after 10 years, we're gonna still be in trouble. And so, I mean, I think we need to talk a little bit about that also.
Funding for the fire.
Yeah.
So are you, so going back to the
Financial
master
aspect.
plan, are you suggesting that we should create another master plan? I mean,
Am I?
Yeah, you mentioned master plan.
No, not right at this point in time. I don't know, we've got one, and then within a certain period of time, we're gonna do another one. So,
So
yeah,
we
I
don't
mean,
have-
I just remember that we were not very happy with the master
Well, yeah,
plan.
we had to go, I think they came back, we had to ask them for some.
Yeah, we ended up,
Cost
we
estimates and things
we drafted responses to all the recommendations to provide a current status update. Those are all codified in the adopted master plan, and then we added all the facility items over time, right? Remember, we did the conceptual cost estimate for the station expansion and the cost estimates for the training facility, and all those are folded into the master plan. And the master plan wasn't adopted by the board until those components were added to it.
Yes.
So the initial AP Triton, I think we labeled it a master plan assessment, and added those other components.
But, yeah, I
to
mean,
it.
obviously, we need to always look at, fire and emergency funding as and figure out, as a strategic goal, so. It may be different, but yes, well, it could have, obviously, we'll have that as a header and then have core strategies below it, and it
And
could
then-
be different things.
And maybe to your point, we don't it's not a matter of, okay, we got the master plan, cross that strategic goal off. Maybe instead of just eliminating it, we say, we keep that goal and we rephrase it to be something like, continue to evaluate and implement
Implement master
Right.
plan.
the master
Well,
plan.
it's-
Yeah,
I think-
implement
Have
master
those-
plan.
Yeah,
But
there
it's
are-
something we should just
Yeah,
definitely.
I don't think we should, I think that.
I don't know that it's the master plan, the verbiage master plan. I
Right.
think it's looking at that plan and saying, what components do we know we need to pull out and
Yeah,
and
implement and master
and
plan.
create a strategy around
Yes.
for implementation.
And that would be
Yeah.
where you could, come back with, during that meeting, come back with a report and we prioritize things for us too.
So we just
Yeah,
finesse.
because there are elements, as the general manager stated, there are elements of the master plan that are complete.
Yeah.
But then there as you're indicating, there are several elements that are not.
Yeah, the goal was to develop a master plan, so that's why I said we did that. Implementing all of its recommendations, we've done some, but there are
That's a
many
whole
others.
different, that's a different thing, so.
And I think we're still looking at a 3-year strategic plan,
Right.
correct?
That's, we could discuss that, but
Yeah.
yeah, that's, you know, at least.
I mean, I think that's
Annually,
gonna be
1 year
important
would-
for staff to
Yes.
have kind of something in mind to say, looking over the next 3 years, what are the things that we need to be focused on?
Yeah.
And set a strategy.
Yeah, and we would,
around.
yeah, we would discuss that on like a format, how we wanna, like,
Yeah.
what kind of, you know, like, one time we did short term, medium term, long term.
Yeah, but I think in terms of, from my professional experience, it's been every year we did a strategic plan. So what I'm suggesting is that we look at it more long-term, maybe
Yeah,
3 years,
3 years, yeah.
like we did
Yeah.
this last
Yes,
one.
exactly. If that's.
And I think we also need to discuss what happens when the SAFER grant ends.
Oh, that would be, well, first, that would be discussed,
That's part of the
gonna be huge.
financial
That's huge.
aspect of
Well,
the
and
fire
also,
department.
well, and also would be, our staffing model. Do we wanna change our staffing model? As general manager mentioned, it was only, you know, 2, so do we wanna change it to, so that way. Change it to something different, and that would be all need to be discussed.
Yeah, and I can set up the kind of the data for showing you what the staffing model looks like, what the industry standard for staffing is, because we're a true 3-0, but again, the firefighter is not a full-time position. Those are still done by reserves.
Okay. All right, let's go to the next one. That's the finance.
Yeah, finance strategic goal, operate TCSD under sound fiscal management and ensure all operating costs of future capital projects are fully funded. These strategies lead to this goal. Develop long-term approach to TCSD's financial needs with effective policies to fund the district's service delivery. You know, we have a set of strategic financial policies. You actually just amended it slightly, just 45 minutes ago. So this is something that's is under regular review. It's been amended several times in the last 5 years. So we do have a long-term approach and we do have established financial policies. Submit a balanced budget for each fiscal year. The year immediately following the drafting of this, that was not the case, at least with one fund, one kind of material issue, Parks and Recreation dealing with COVID. But largely otherwise, all of the funds have been balanced with just really one exception, and that's really the district's drainage fund. And we've talked about that every year. Review the strategic financial policies annually. Your admin and finance committee has done that and recommended changes where appropriate. And then monitor water and sewer rates every 5 years to ensure revenue is sufficient to meet operating and capital needs in those areas. We continue to monitor them. The rate structure was last implemented in 2018, so it's actually just about it's a little over 6 years old now. There were water rate increases for the first 5 years of that time period, and sewer for the first 3 years of that time period. Your rates still meet your operational needs pretty objectively. I mean, we're bringing in more money than we spend on operations. What we're really missing right now is an updated water and wastewater master plan to identify and assign project costs. And so that is really the next component to evaluating the rate structure.
So that could be our strategic goal then,
Yeah.
master plan.
We really need that element, because we're operating on kind of older cost estimates for some of those projects and kind of an outdated prioritization of those projects. Any other questions on those?
No, I mean, from what I see, and I think these are things we could continue to keep. No reason, like submit a balanced budget for each fiscal year, you know.
I don't know that we need to say it, and
Well, yeah.
again, I'm looking at review the strategic financial policies annually, that's kind of a policy statement as opposed to something that's strategic. So I think,
We could remove it.
I think we can move that.
You agree with that?
And
Remove that one, okay,
and the
remove that
balanced
one and the
budget.
balance, but I guess that's that's the given, or is a policy, okay? Effective policies to, okay, first, develop long-term approach to TCSC. Don't understand this one, to be honest, develop long-term approach to TCSC's financial needs with effective policies to fund districts. I mean, it's kind of wordy, it's like, can you get anything from that?
Effective policies,
So I don't know if that needs to stay.
I don't think it's specific
Yeah.
enough.
Yeah, we could remove that one and then we could come up with something new. Discussing that, okay? And then you talked about the next step would be. So you're saying that we should remove this and then put a different one?
Well, I think it's, we're missing current master plans in water and wastewater. That if we had them, we would be able to more fully evaluate the current rates.
Okay, so,
Operationally, we're good.
yeah,
You know, both in the water and wastewater, particularly in water, we're bringing in more money than we had anticipated we would back in 2018. Largely because of the virtual meter issue and we had more customers sign up for virtual meter agreements than we had anticipated back when that was developed.
so,
That just needs to be tweaked.
Yeah.
then.
okay. Yeah, so I mean, to meet operating, so, I mean, every five, so yeah, it's just the capital
Yeah,
needs that we
capital
need to
needs
look
to
at,
take
so,
out the operating.
yeah, so we could, okay, alright. Okay, so we have these will, changes and obviously during our meeting we'll add more as we need it when Justin, I guess, is here for the water. You could go over that. Alright, next partnership.
Partnerships, strategic goal, collaborate regularly with other government agencies and local organizations to create opportunities for TCSD to deliver enhanced services to the community. And then there were these agencies that we had and largely still have relationships with, so maintain the ongoing collaboration with Templeton Unified School District. We share kids, we share program, we use their facilities for our programs. We hold our programs, particularly for the basketball program and also soccer at their facilities. We're dependent on those facilities for those programs.
So shouldn't that core strategy belong, wouldn't it be more appropriate to have that under Park and Rec?
Well, I just use that as an example for Templeton Unified School District, but
Because we
Yeah,
have
we
to have
did
the
some training,
relationship
we
with
haven't
the
tweaked
use
it.
of the-
Well, I guess it was, that was just.
This is a large-
strategic
I know.
goal, so.
But who's owning it is my.
well,
Yeah.
we have, I mean, I think the fire chief mentioned there was, emergency management training that was conducted in partnership with the school district. This year, so I think there are relations, we had, for a little while, we borrow equipment from one another. And for maintenance purposes, primarily for parks, but there's a relationship that's deeper than just simply scheduling gym time.
And we have ongoing coordination with the MOT director, with regards to evacuation drills and a variety of different things that take place at all of the different campuses. So it's a constant coordination.
Could probably have it in both.
Yeah, I would
sections,
say
maybe.
put it in the sections then, because having it here, it's like no department's owning it per se.
Yeah.
So that's why I'm saying is that the first one, what I always think of is Templeton Unified School District, it's Park and Rec. So maybe this strategic goal is in each department where appropriate.
So let me give you another example. We were required during this time period to do testing of all schools for lead and copper. And so we partner with the school district to provide that testing at all those school sites. So this is, it's broader than just one, but it's broader than one service area. But admittedly, the most significant partnership exists with.
Well, there may be overlap. So it may be that there's overlap with the school district with both fire and Park and Rec and wastewater. But what I'm saying is that if it's here, I look at it and say, well, I don't know who's really owning it. If it's under each department where there's ownership of these relationships, it makes more sense. So for the county.
Well, you're probably gonna run into the situation, I wanna go through all of these, this is gonna apply for each and every one of these, where we have multiple departments having these kinds of arrangements. So for example, we talk about the county, we have collaborations and partnerships with the county in most areas. For example, in fire, a great deal of collaboration with CAL FIRE, County Fire, and through county-wide organizations that help organize,
Engineers.
things like, automatic aid, mutual aid, and those kinds of things. In our engineering, it's with planning and building primarily. We coordinate on parks because we utilize their park facility
And
for our
events.
programs. We're very much, the whole organization has to integrate. That's probably too rosy of a word. Should have a better integration with the county. So
So what are the milestones to these core strategies then?
So can we identify subsections within these strategies for our
Yes.
current collaborations rather than migrating each strategy to different departments? So
Yeah.
maintain at least some transparency of what our current collaborations are and the ones that we want to currently collaborate on rather than the general. So
Yeah.
that at least individuals know what we are collaborating with these other agencies with.
Yeah, so go a little more details.
Yeah,
I agree with that.
Carry to this template for future strategic plans, like if we find the format of strategic goal and core strategy helpful, great. But if we want to think more creatively about how the way we organize our thoughts beyond just a core strategy like that, so that we do have more specific metrics, without necessarily replicating the same goal.
I
in
agree,
relation
right,
to
my issue right now is this provides no ownership and it provides no information
Right,
to anyone that's
What it
looking
is.
at our strategic.
Yeah.
What is?
so yeah,
Because to me, it's just verbiage.
right.
You can't put milestones behind this. You can't really look at, well, what is that collaboration that's going on?
Well, I think the way that it stands, yes, it's very vague. I think that we can, when we sit down and we have all of, our department representatives in front of us too, we can come up with ways to measure it more concretely and then have it reflected in a written document. So I think that like a note for us to make in relation to all of these, because I think partnerships are gonna touch multiple departments, is thinking about, okay, where does Templeton Unified School District, where does the county interact with each of the departments, and what would success or strategy look like in bolstering the partnerships between that entity and the departments?
Well, right now, this way it's written is you can't measure success.
Yeah, this is.
You cannot measure, are you achieving this strategic goal? And unless you have it in a format where you can actually measure the results, it's really not a strategic goal.
Well, I mean.
Right, so
And
that's-
there, now this is just.
So maybe, I mean, the way we have it broken down for each, like with Templeton Unified District, San Luis Obispo County, I mean, maybe we'll just come up with a heading and then put our expectation. Now, we don't even need to mention all the different jurisdictions, right? I mean,
Well, if you
it's
have
kind
a
of given.
strategic goal, the objective is you've got a goal.
Yeah,
How are you
but-
going to achieve
Well,
that
that
goal?
would be.
What are the
We'll
milestones
change
below?
our core strategies. I mean, say
Yeah.
it differently, basically. That's what I think. we
Yeah.
should-
I'm gonna suggest that Jeff come up with a way of formatting this.
Yeah, so I think what I'm hearing is that a bigger picture, you want the goals to be more easily, whether you achieve them or not, to be more easily identifiable.
Identifiable to also, so that anyone looking at this knows what those,
I do want to remind the board that the verbiage here was drafted after about 10 hours of
I know,
very
I know.
laborious time, and it's,
I was there, I
so,
was there,
so,
painfully there.
And so I agree, the language is ambiguous, it's just actually the term maintain ongoing. That tells me that as long as you keep doing what you've been doing, you've achieved it.
But it doesn't tell you what you're doing. So, I just think that
I mean,
there's,
again,
there's
I
some massaging that needs to be done
I
of
mean,
this
we-
in order. for it to be-
Or maybe this doesn't need to be a
Yes,
strategic goal,
no,
it's just part of
exactly.
who we are.
Yeah. So
Part of
maybe
our
we'll
culture
just-
and not-
no, I mean, seriously, we could take it all out. It doesn't need to be in there. I mean, if
I
we
think
find it.
that's for consideration as well.
Okay.
Because
Let's
for me, right now, you can't measure
Yeah,
it,
so
and
then
if you
why have it
can't
in there?
measure it,
Then
then
why you have it?
it can't be a goal.
Yes, then why have
Okay,
it?
moving right along.
I'm just
So what
reporting,
if we
I'm
did
just
question
reporting
mark
your
on that one?
adopted goals.
I know, trust me, I was there.
The next one, so our City of Paso Robles, I just quickly mentioned, we've got just as examples, good partnerships with fire and emergency services. We respond to one another's calls. Our kids play with Paso Robles kids in recreation programs. We collaborate. It's not necessarily with the city formally, but they're held at city facilities. And then we have ongoing partnerships with Paso Robles on the Nacimiento Water Project. They're members with us with the Atascadero Basin GSA. Those have been maintained. I'll almost the exact same things with the city of Atascadero. Actually, the same circumstances with the city of Atascadero. I will just mention on this very last one that the Templeton Chamber of Commerce no longer exists as an independent entity. It was folded in with the Paso Robles Chamber of Commerce or merged. And most of the programs that the chamber offered back, again, this is 5 years ago, no longer exists in Templeton. There's no Templeton Chamber, wine festival, beer festival, Founder's Day, etc. So that has changed. It's not, we are a member of the Paso Robles and Templeton Chamber of Commerce, and I have occasionally attended some events, but there are not as many offerings from the chamber in the community.
Okay. Any questions from public on that? Comments on the strategic partnerships?
Remove it.
Okay, cool. Okay. All right, next is retain a stable TCSD workforce. These strategies lead to fulfillment.
Yeah, so we had evaluate the recommendations of a compensation study, again, to sort of better frame this, again, to rewind the clock. In late 2019, the district had awarded a compensation contract to a consulting RGS. And so that, when this was being drafted in February of 2020, that work was being done. Nobody knew what that would look like. It was underway. That compensation study was presented to the board in August of 2021. A few months into the COVID circumstances. In December of 2021, in August of 2020. Later that year, the district adopted a compensation philosophy, and over the following several years implemented sort of stair-step strategy to fully implement that compensation philosophy. That has been completed. That though was based on data from early 2020. The second core strategy identified, again, this it's easy to be critical now because hindsight's 2020. Identify ways to reduce the increasing costs of recruitment and training. I think that was really more talking about the challenges of recruiting and the costs of staff turnover in training. We're spending more money in recruiting than we did previously, largely because we're having more difficult time obtaining qualified applicants. We've had many positions where we've had to remain vacant for extended periods to obtain sufficient qualified applicants. So that's on better shape today than it was 5 years ago, but we're sort of post-COVID, and that was a real game changer for public agencies and the way prospective employees viewed work. And then the economic circumstances have changed really considerably too, in terms of the cost of living, the cost of housing, and all of us in this area are faced with some real challenges with regards to obtaining a qualified workforce.
Okay. So any comments on that? I mean, I don't know, compensation study has been done, so we followed it. So.
I think one thing that we need to discuss as far as staffing is concerned is the fact that within the next 1 to 5 years, we're losing 3 key people in this organization on how we going to replace them and what's the process. And we need something.
Succession planning.
Succession planning.
Yes.
We'll put
I
that
think
down.
that's the next one.
It's interesting because that's the same situation we were in 5 years ago. So again, just to help frame the
But I
conversation.
mean, before we go though,
Yeah.
we don't need this, so this staff strategic goal. Can we eliminate it?
So what about
I mean-
retention? I mean,
Yeah, I think you could eliminate, I think you could replace the core strategies. I think the retaining a stable workforce is, we're in the service industry. This is the most, we're
Well,
nothing
yeah,
if we don't
okay.
have a staff. This is what keeps me up at night, being able to obtain, getting and keeping people to do the job that you've asked us to do. This is probably the most critical thing that we perform.
Okay, so we'll eliminate the core strategies and then.
well,
and
but
we'll
if you
discuss
look at the compensation study, it was done in 2019.
2020.
Was it 2020?
Time goes very quickly.
Yeah.
Yep.
It was longer. So if we're looking at a 3-year strategic plan, we probably should keep a compensation study in there.
No.
Because if we're talking retention of a stable TCSD workforce, if we're not competitive in the marketplace, it could be because of compensation. So we should at least have some, as a placeholder.
So, okay.
Sure,
this
but
says
can we
that-
also evaluate compensation studies based upon a time frame? So that we have an understanding, so rather than having a general, we should have compensation studies looking at as like every 5 years, we engage in a compensation study, so at least then we are notifying the public, the sayings like we are actively pursuing these compensation studies, or at least re-upping them to notify that, like the public employees are at least have that measure being done on our end.
We could just have it just evaluate well.
No, you're
Yeah,
gonna
this
make
was-
a new one.
for
Yeah,
This was,
yeah.
I guess, this was referring to something that was underway at the time, and
Yeah,
somebody
yeah,
read this
yeah.
today wouldn't.
Yeah.
But we're gonna need a new compensation study, so I think the strategic goal stays. The core strategy
Will change,
changes, it's
okay.
not evaluate the recommendations, it's
Yeah,
consider
yeah.
Completing a compensation study.
Okay. Okay. Next one now, sorry about that.
No, no problem.
Wait, any questions or comments from public on that? No, okay.
Well, Eric, are you okay with that verbiage?
I am.
Okay.
And the final one that we plan to review tonight, also related to staffing, ensure continuity of district's legacy expertise into the future. This strategy fulfills, leads to the fulfillment of this goal. Again, just to sort of frame this, in early 2020, you were anticipating the loss of a couple of really long-term senior district staff, a couple of people who've been with the district 30 years. And they did in fact retire in 2021, those couple anyway, so a year and a half or so later. And, we were able to successfully integrate new staff members. Maybe there's always some bumps in the road, but I think in general that was a successful transition. Even if they weren't, even if things didn't come together ideally, and as if you could draw them up, they would come in a little more integrated fashion. But we did successfully transition key long-term folks to new folks and keep going.
Good job.
Without disruptions of service.
I would agree.
So I have a question. Is there a policy and procedurals that are in place for current staff members to essentially document all of these duties and tasks? So in the case of an emergency replacement staffing or things of that nature, that new staff members actually have the documentation necessary to take over those positions?
Yeah, it's not a district-wide universal means, but there are, for example, in accounting, we have procedure manuals for check writing or processing payments. In utilities, we have procedures for flushing hydrants, et cetera. They're not set up in a sort of very universal way, but I think it's a good question. That could be better established or a policy better developed and implemented to ensure that if somebody were to step in blindly, they'd be able to pick up the pieces.
Okay.
It's the problem with government jobs. They're
A
gone.
private
Yeah,
sector.
like, yeah, they're gone and then someone.
Not necessarily, not where I came from.
You guys like. Planned it? There's always, I always see like a 3 or 4 month gap between hiring. Okay,
I mean, I think we should talk about things like putting in the budget. If somebody leaves 2 or 3 months for that person to stick around. and
oh, I see, like a
train,
policy.
Policies like that.
Well, if you could find someone.
Yeah, we did that in the case of, we had, if there's sufficient notice, we can do that. And for example, in this time frame, I guess it's applicable to discuss, we had a longtime accounting technician who performed payroll duties, and she gave us a lot of notice about, her pending retirement. We came to the board, got the authorization to have 2 persons in that job classification temporarily, hired somebody so that we could train them up. That is, often not possible because sometimes we'll give 2 week notice or a month or whatever. So there isn't time to our budget authorized a certain amount of full-time employees, right? I mean, so we would need to seek a budget amendment to be able to bring a second person in, have funding to do that, and then recruit and hire. So it really depends on the amount of notice that we obtain, which is not always. I think in Tracy's case, it was 6 or 9 months.
Nobody can retire without board approval.
Yeah.
You like that, Tom?
Taking the 5th.
I think that's it.
Yeah, that's it.
Okay, well, great. Well, thank you, guys. I think just going over this just refreshes our, because I know we've done it, so it kind of refreshes, where we were, and then for you guys, kind of
Yeah.
gives a little sense of where we need to go. But as you mentioned before, this doesn't have to be a template. It could be something different. And if somebody comes up with a better idea, it's definitely worth listening to, because if you looked at this whole strategic plan, it was a thick booklet that could get confusing, and there were areas where you didn't even have any areas where you saw, okay, what was accomplished or who's responsible for it. So I mean, I think I'm looking for something a little bit, simpler and to the point and easy for this. I'm sure you guys were looking at this strategic plan every day.
Actually, this is pretty standard.
Looked at it several times.
Yeah.
This is pretty standard. It's the details you get into is you get into the milestones and then you get into the metrics.
Yeah.
And how you actually
Yeah.
measure success
Mhm.
and then report that out.
Yeah.
Which I don't think we need that level of detail,
Yes.
but we still need the strategic goals and the
Well,
strategic.
yes, no, I'm talking
Yeah,
about what we had previously.
Yeah,
it
I
was
think the
too much.
verbiage we
Yes.
can massage a
Yes.
little better.
Yeah.
To have it a little more meaningful. Because if it's
Exactly.
not something we can, provides any meaning, then we
Yeah.
move it.
All right, great. So we'll finish this up at the next meeting. And then from there, we proceed to start on our strategic plan. All right, so that's done. Let's go to next item is this the? Yes, LAFCO Special District nomination.
Yeah, good evening. As the board's aware, LAFCO sent out notification to special districts. I believe there are 35 special districts in the county. That there are 2 seats open on LAFCO, and we are now in a nomination period. Any of the 35 special districts may nominate one or presumably 2 of their board members to one of the 2 seats. One of the seats is to fill the remaining 2 years of a prior LAFCO special district representative's term. So there's 2 years, a partial term remaining. The second seat is for a full term, just a 4-year cycle, just happens to coincide. So I had asked that if this is something that I wouldn't normally have on the agenda unless I thought there was interest from one of the board members. And so after sending this out, Board President Fardanish indicated that he might be interested in serving on LAFCO and would seek your nomination for his running for that spot. The way this will work out is if you choose to nominate somebody, we'll submit that nomination to LAFCO. At the end of the close of the nomination period, if there's just one person for each of the two seats, those two persons will be seated and serve on LAFCO. If there are more than one person, two or more people for either of the seats, there will be an election. If that occurs, the election of special district representatives will come back to the board, to all 35 special districts, Templeton CSD being one of them. And this board will be able to cast a vote for each of those seats that have more than one person. The nomination period runs through February 7th. I'm happy to try to answer any of the questions that you may have.
Yes, thank you.
So I have a question. I'm looking at this memorandum from LAFCO. Where it has the commissioners on the left. Is that who's currently serving on LAFCO's board?
Robert.
Yeah, are you asking about who are the current
Yeah,
special
yeah.
district members?
Yeah, it's
Or
Robert
Yeah.
Haynes,
Robert Enns and
and then.
Yeah, his term is expiring.
his term's
And
expiring.
then
Well,
Ed-
no, but
Eddie
on
is
the
the
far
alternate.
left of the memo, there's the commissioners.
Yes,
So Robert Ans is the special district member. So this is,
as
The
well
makeup
as
of
Marshall
the-
Olinsky, but he resigned, so that's why his name is
okay.
listed there. He
So
was
this is the makeup of the committee.
Yeah, and then Eddie, he's the alternate
Yeah.
for the special district.
Yeah.
What district was Alinsky from?
Los Osos Community Service District.
He finally gave up, huh?
Yeah, he's off the CSD board as well.
So Director Fardanish, you're looking to fill Marshall's position on
Well-
here, his term, or are you looking for the Roberts?
Well, that's a great question, because I thought, because when I looked at the application, I thought that you could just check both boxes. But apparently you have to choose
Choose one.
either 2-year or a 4-year term. So I do need to do a little bit more research, so I've spoken with the LAFCO executive director, and he said we could have, if you wish, the board could nominate me, just keep that open, and then when I felt that, once I do my research, because I gotta figure out
In the
who's
other-
running,
Yeah.
you know, what's going on. Then, when I complete the application, I could just check one box, but depending on who's running and things like that, I could either do the 4-year or the 2-year term. So I'm open to both.
Well, I'm fully supportive of you throwing your hat in the ring, so
Thank you.
I think it would be a benefit to TCSD's board to have someone directly involved with LAFCO.
Yeah, well, thank you.
So-
That was what I was hoping as well, to get
Yeah.
a little bit more involved and, you know, with the county and,
Go for it.
yeah, so.
Okay.
3.5 years, you can run for supervisor.
Oh, no, thank you. Okay, so, any other questions or comments on that?
I just wanted to know, have historically we had representation?
So when you say we, special, in this county, special districts have a seat in LAFCO. That is not the case universally. So not every county's LAFCO permits special districts to be on it, but for a couple of decades, that's been the case. To my knowledge, nobody from Templeton CSD has ever served on LAFCO. But it would follow this sort of process. It's kind of a formal process. I don't recall, at least in the time I've been here, nobody from Templeton CSD has been interested in serving.
What's his name? He's still around.
David, but we had a former board member who served as a member of a public representative on LAFCO, but after he was on the board here.
And then how is the public member who chose and selected that, like, anyone who resides within,
The county,
yeah,
yes, I don't recall how those get appointed, however.
Probably from the Board of Supervisors, I would assume.
Yes. I think so. Because RAC has that too, public members.
Yeah, we are not involved in electing the member from the public, but it's true that you could have a Templeton resident serve on the LAFCO board as a member of the public.
Yeah, cause I know he was on the board for a long time and then he was on, but you're right, I think it was after.
Yeah, and I don't recall ever
You don't-
really
you don't-
getting any communication back from Robert
Who is?
Enns. And so that's why I think it's a benefit to have somebody from TCSD's board serving on this. So I think that's a way of getting more connected with LAFCO.
I mean, it's gonna be a challenge to get on, and there's gonna be quite a bit of, a number of people running, so the odds are, you know, I would
Maybe
love to,
not,
but then.
maybe not.
Well, previously, it's been quite a bit, so we'll
People
see.
may not be banging the door down. But no, I think it's to our benefit to have someone from this board serving on that committee, so I fully
agree.
support
I do too.
your nomination, so.
So then I would recommend, because of the specific circumstances that have been presented, that the motion be made in such a way that the board, again, if you're gonna consider making the motion, that you would nominate Naveed Fardanish to serve on LAFCO with either the 4-year or the 2-year term at his choice. So it's clear that your nomination was for either position.
I'll make that motion,
What is
I'll
it?
second.
what you just said.
No, so I'll make the motion that the board approve Naveed Fardanish to serve on either one of the open special district seats on LAFCO.
I'll second.
Okay, it's great. Roll call, please.
Directors Logan,
Aye.
Peterson,
All right.
Mortensen,
Aye.
Tyrone,
Yes.
and Fardonish.
Aye. Alright, motion passes 5-0. Thank you, guys.
You're welcome.
Go get that one.
Be careful what you ask for.
Yeah. Alright, so next is appointment of board members to committees, so.
Sure, I'm happy to. So the board bylaws state that the board, the president shall appoint, board members to your standing committees and to regional agencies that we participate in, at your meeting in January. So it is January. The appointments are as follows. The board president has assigned as follows, as shown in the memo, but I'll just read it for the record. For the Administration and Finance Committee, Logan and Tyrone. For Water and Wastewater Utilities, Mortensen and Peterson. Fire and Emergency Management, Fardanish and Mortensen. Parks, Recreation and Refuse, Fardanish and Tyrone. I'm just gonna pause there for 1 second and state that the board's earlier assignment of residents would be in addition to these committee members. So the residents you assign to those committees will serve with these specific board members. On the external organizations, the Nacimiento Commission, Peterson with Mortensen serving as the alternate. To the Templeton Area Advisory Group, Logan with Tyrone as the alternate. Water Resources Advisory Committee, this has fluctuated between staff representatives and board representatives. And so at this point, it would be myself and Lori Azim as the primary and alternate without having a board member serve on, without having a member of the board of directors serving as the representative. And RAC is actually made up of a combination of staff and elected officials and members of the public. It's kind of a large organization. And then the GSA Executive Committee, this is the Atascadero Basin Groundwater Sustainability Agency Executive Committee. Fardanish as the primary and Peterson as the alternate for 2025.
Any questions, comments on that? Good, alright, well, thank you. Alright, moving on to general manager's report. No, sorry, go ahead.
Public comment on the last item.
Okay, yes, go ahead.
Yes, certainly. Well, thank you. I appreciate you selecting those. I just have one comment. We have had the same GSA and NACI reps for a number of years, and I think Wayne is going to continue serving the board until he has his wheelchair pulled up into. So, you know, he will have that area covered, but understanding Nacimiento and the GSA, they're pretty involved in important committees, and somehow cross-pollinating some of our committees, our boards, so that you know what's going on about those organizations. Right now, we just deal with the same individuals for a number of years, and it would be good to have some way in which those board members could learn about those agencies better than we do now. Not providing a recommendation other than that's something we should be
And we talked earlier about some succession planning. And that may be one way where we can integrate some of our board members on some other committees so they understand these groups and organizations.
Thank you, Lorenzo, appreciate it.
I believe there's a good opportunity for Peterson to extend the invitation to myself and the Nacimiento. I have some experience within that from the city of San Luis Obispo. And it'd be a good opportunity for me to refresh my knowledge as it applies to Templeton CSD.
I agree with your comments because as long as I've served on the board, this is the way it's been for those two committees. With the same individual, so I agree with those comments. Thank you for bringing that up.
I will point out that both of those meetings are Brown Act meetings. They happen to also be very short. They also happen to be held here. So it's a very easy meeting for others to attend. They meet late afternoon on Wednesdays. Maybe Nacimiento Commission's on Thursday. But they're very short meetings and they're held here in Templeton.
Yeah, it's public comment, I mean, it's public meeting, so anybody could attend.
I have another comment, and I don't disagree with anything you put down here, but I noticed that the president is on two committees. And it's president's basic, one of their functions is if somebody can't attend the meeting, the president goes to those meetings. And with the president on two of the committees, that's gonna be kind of hard to do. Just a comment.
Now that the president's on laptop.
Don't know that.
And it probably won't happen, but if something happens and you can't go to those meetings.
Then the vice president would assume that role.
Okay, no problem.
The committee assignments are revisited annually.
Okay.
Yeah, these assignments are just for 2025.
General manager.
Yeah, I don't actually have any additional items other than what I provided to the board in my weekend update. I'm happy to answer any questions if you have any, but no additional announcements came up.
I don't have anything.
You know, we're kind of following the holidays here. There's been a collective a lot of.
Yeah, well, you're right, because of the holidays, there hasn't been a whole lot.
We are
Thank you.
continuing with the release of water units, and the next batch should go out in about a week and a half.
Okay, wonderful.
We did get, I think I mentioned to you though, 25 units were accepted and then actually purchased over the Christmas holiday.
So we have still about 30 units left or so, approximately. Oh, 40.
Can you speak to the meeting that you had with the PUSD superintendent?
Tomorrow.
Oh, it's tomorrow. Okay. And how does the school bond measure, how does that affect TCSD?
Maybe I can share that with you after tomorrow, because I don't know.
Oh, okay.
This was something was blindly
Yeah,
requested.
because I don't
I'm not.
because I don't recall there being anything in that measure that would impact TCSD, so, okay.
We'll know more.
All right, thank you.
Happy to keep up my collaboration though with TUSD. Ongoing, maintain
Ongoing.
ongoing.
Get those facilities, we have that MOU.
Yes, we do. Well, we've pushed for improving some of the facilities that we use, like basketball courts and things of that
And then-
nature. That still would remain.
Are you moving to committee reports?
Yes, I'm
no questions. Yeah, we'll go ahead to committee reports, which is first one, fire and emergency. Any questions or comments on that? Public, any questions or comments on fire and emergency? Okay. Next is the GSA Executive Committee meeting. Any questions on that? I just want to report that during that meeting, we picked the consultant to do our annual report. It's a state mandate that we have to do the annual report. Unfortunately, it's gonna cost $50,000. But not for us, is that's a part of, I think 20% of it, close to 20% will be our share. But is a state mandate, we have to do it, and even though technically, they have said that our, Atascadero Basin is not in an emergency and even it's optional for us to do the, original report that we did. The thought behind it is that we need to continue to do our annual reports just to make sure we stay in compliance with that, so because eventually they're gonna get to us, but meanwhile, it's gonna cost that kind of money to do it. Again, it's part of state regulation that we have to deal with. But so we picked this and then we're gonna continue working on the annual report, so, but everything as far as the basin itself, it's fine. Okay, any questions on that?
It's part of LAFCO, you can change it.
No. Tag, any questions or comments for tag report? Anything from public on that? Okay. And then directors report and comments, any directors involved with any meetings that they attended on behalf of the district?
Not here, but I'm hoping that LABCO, if you are elected to that position, that we would see some information coming back to this board in terms of items that are discussed.
Oh, of course, yeah. If, that's a big F. Too much pressure.
I'm hopeful for you. I'm hopeful.
Okay, all right, okay, and then just looking forward to our next meeting, we're gonna continue the review of the 2020-23 strategic plan. Also, we are gonna discuss regular board meeting time, start time, currently at 7 o'clock, we'll discuss whether there's a desire to change that. And then, I think that's the only two items I know for now.
Yeah, we may have the Measure A Oversight Committee report for that meeting. It's not yet been prepared, but that's the goal of the chairperson.
Okay. All right, good. Otherwise, okay, nothing else. We'll go ahead and adjourn the meeting.